Disgrace, my mom yelled at my pregnancy. I raised him alone. Her real grandchild was heaven sent, then a stroke hit. Now her life depends on me. I shuffled back to my place on a Saturday morning, my legs aching from the overnight shift I'd just finished at the hospital. That 12-hour stint in the ER had been exceptionally draining. As I trudged up the 3 flights of stairs to my apartment, since there's no elevator, the delicious scent of pancakes and the noise of someone puttering around lightly drifted from my door. The instant I opened the door, my 12-year-old Tommy spun around, still wearing his apron. On the countertop, I saw pancakes, light and airy, piled high like a tiny peak. Everything about the breakfast preparation was absolutely flawless, even including blueberries and bananas. "Welcome home, Mom. I made pancakes today. I also got the maple syrup, so make sure you eat a lot. Oh, and I got an A+ on my math test." Tommy's grin took a little bit of the edge off my exhaustion. My son was the one who always prepared the weekend breakfasts. His thoughtfulness toward me, especially after my night shifts, always touched my heart. He was my pride and joy as a single mother, a boy who was successful in school and had excellent manners. Sitting at the dining table, I thought back on the events of 17 years ago. When I, a high school junior, saw the positive result on my pregnancy test, it felt like the world had gone dark. My mother, who was very involved with First United Methodist Church of Scottsdale, was scared of nothing more than an out-of-wedlock pregnancy. The guy I'd been dating vanished from school the very day I told him about the pregnancy and simply left town. My mother Patricia's rage still echoes in my memory. "Disgraceful," she'd fume. "How can I possibly go to church now? You need to get an abortion immediately." For my mom, who had spent over 3 decades working as a secretary for the church, the fact that her daughter was pregnant and unmarried was the absolute worst embarrassment imaginable. However, I chose to keep my baby. That choice would permanently alter my connection with my family. Luckily, the pastor at the church at that time was supportive. My part-time boss was understanding, and the school counselor also stood by me. I went to night school in order to get my nursing license, and today I'm a well-regarded person at the hospital nearby. Meanwhile, my sister Ashley had always been the perfect child. She matured, graduated from a well-known university, and wed James Brooks, who was a partner at the biggest law firm in our town. Their wedding 2 years before was as lavish as something out of a storybook. Watching my sister in her immaculate white wedding dress, our mother cried tears of happiness. Mom adored Ashley, saying, "You are my ultimate joy. I am so proud of the person you've become." At church events, Ashley was all anyone ever spoke about. In the meantime, my life was kept completely under wraps. To preserve my mother's standing at the church, my son Tommy was presented as an adopted, distant relative. Though I went through a lot of uncomfortable moments during Sunday services, I kept my silence. Instead, I treasured the time I had with my son. On holidays, we would visit museums, and I reveled in the time spent with Tommy as his eyes lit up with an interest in science. I was absolutely resolved to fully back my son's ambition of becoming a physician. "Hey, Mom," Tommy yelled. "There was something in the mail yesterday." My face fell when I noticed the envelope lying there. It was an invitation to my sister's baby shower, and it was at the expensive Phoenician hotel. The words, done in shining gold, sparkled on the fancy, cream-colored paper. My mom, just last week, had actually said over the phone, "Finally, I'll have a real grandchild." Those words still hurt. "You don't have to go," Tommy said, his voice small. "We could go to a movie instead." The distance between my sister Ashley, who lived in the fancy part of Scottsdale, and me in a simple apartment had just gotten bigger over time. But I never let my son see me be vulnerable. "It's all right. We'll go," I said softly while circling the RSVP box, definitely making my decision. I had a feeling that maybe, just maybe, this would be the last time I'd have to put up with this kind of thing. The bright Arizona sunshine was lighting up the desert city outside. The church bells signaled the start of a new day. Their echoing sound felt foreboding, like a warning of some sort. Inside the apartment, Tommy was telling me about his week's events, happily while pouring syrup on his pancakes. When I pulled my car into the Phoenician's parking lot, which was really fancy, I let out a big sigh. My navy dress felt unusually heavy on me because I was tired from working night shifts all week. Tommy, sitting next to me, was wearing a white shirt and a tie, and he seemed really uptight. "Mom, do you think Grandma and everyone will actually like this present?" Tommy asked, carefully clutching the album he'd made. It was a baby record book he'd put together for his summer break assignment. This was his heart and soul, and he'd included information from a medical point of view after going through several books about how babies grow, carefully readying it for his new cousin. "I'm positive it'll be a great present." While saying that, a feeling of sadness crept into my chest. Several fancy cars, owned by folks from the church, were already parked in front of the hotel, including the pastor's wife and some important women from the First United Methodist Church of Scottsdale. When we walked into the lobby, we were met with enormous flower arrangements. The sweet scent of roses and calla lilies drifted all around. At the check-in desk, Ashley's best friend, Sarah, looked very put together and was looking at the guest list. "Oh, Linda," Sarah's voice dripped with disapproval. Even the way she marked the list seemed like she was rolling her eyes. "Your seats are well over there on the side." Our table was located way in the back, far away from the main table by where the waitstaff were. As we entered the party room, there were already around 50 people there, and it was pretty loud. Ashley, wearing a maternity dress, was surrounded by these really wealthy-looking women. The light pink dress she had on probably came from some high-end designer, likely costing thousands of dollars. What a beautiful baby shower. Ashley's fashion sense is certainly different. I feel certain that this will be a loving family when the baby is finally here. As praise filled the air, someone noticed Linda and Tommy and they muttered, "That kid." Yes, that one they adopted. They're really her daughters, though, but it's probably better to keep quiet about it today. Those hushed conversations started to spread. You could tell something was different in the room. Beside Ashley, Mother Patricia was radiating an almost regal air. Having served at the church for more than 3 decades, she was a prominent figure here. But I noticed that her look at Linda was quite harsh. I wondered if we ought to say hello at the very least. Tommy said, sounding quiet. Holding the photo album to his chest, he cautiously tried to go toward them. I knew his motives were good and it warmed my heart. But then it happened. "Today we're celebrating my real grandchild," Patricia announced to everyone. "Your child has no part in this." For a second, everyone was quiet. "Grandma, am I not family too?" Ashley laughed when Tommy spoke, his voice shaky. "Family? That's absurd. You're our disgrace." Those remarks felt like a sharp sting. My mother signaled a waiter and a man in black approached. "I'm sorry, but these people..." Suddenly, something broke within me. "Tommy, let's just leave." Taking my son's little hand, I quietly left the party. In the elevator, Tommy finally started crying. He gripped the album tightly and his shoulders were shaking. "It's okay," I told him. "We don't need to see those people again." Back in the parking area, I hugged my son tightly inside the vehicle. The desert landscape was ablaze with the fiery red hues of sunset, reflecting off the opulent Phoenician building. That evening, I found myself seated at my computer. Documenting occurrences at the hospital had become second nature to me from my nursing career. I made the decision to commence a fresh entry today. April 13, 2024. Incidents at the baby shower. As I started to write the heading, I let a small, private smile appear. It was important for me to document all the happenings of this day, because eventually these written records might be essential. Tommy was already asleep in the bedroom. Lying near his pillow was the photo album that he couldn't show anyone. The front of the album was inscribed with the words, "Welcome, dear cousin." My phone on the desk lit up. I saw a text from my mom. "Why did you leave? Everyone was watching. Don't shame us." I put the message away without rereading it. Even at midnight in May, the emergency room at Mayo Clinic Scottsdale was bustling. I was finishing up charting while guiding a newly hired nurse. 1 month had passed since the baby shower, and my everyday life had returned to normal. Responding to a resident doctor whose voice echoed in the hallway with an emergency transport, I instantly switched to work mode. I looked over the details from the ambulance report. Female, aged 67, abrupt loss of consciousness and partial paralysis on the right side. Potential stroke. The instant I saw the patient's name, my hand stopped for just a second. Patricia Miller. It was my mother. Moments later, the siren of the ambulance got closer. Lying on the gurney, my mom was struggling to breathe. Despite being awake, it was obvious her right side wasn't moving as well as it should. The right side of her face was a little bit crooked. I knew what I needed to do. Linda, that's me, started issuing orders in a composed manner. Get her a CT scan, stat, run blood work, and get the neurologist here. More than a decade of experience allowed me to move instinctively. You. My mother managed a raspy voice, struggling to get the words out through her face, which was now distorted. You could see how worried she was in her eyes. Her usual bossy demeanor was gone, and what was left was just a vulnerable old lady. "Mom, please try not to talk right now. We're about to, start the examination." Linda quieted her mother using her professional voice. Footsteps, different ones, echoed in the quiet hospital halls at midnight. Ashley, along with her husband James, had hurried over. She was panting, clutching her belly, which was 7 months pregnant. "Mom is what could. That's not ideal, you shouldn't have run." Ashley finally realized my presence when I spoke. Then, like she just remembered I worked here in the emergency room, her face shifted. "Are you handling this?" "Yes, I am. I'll do everything I can." Ashley didn't have anything to say after my direct answer. The 30 minutes we had to wait for the test results seemed like forever. Ashley was shivering in the waiting room, leaning on her husband for support. Seeing her, I briefly remembered what happened at the baby shower. But then I quickly shook my head, pushing those feelings away. The scans showed the results of Miller's tests. Dr. Thompson, the neurologist, started her explanation while pointing at the pictures. According to her, it's an embolic stroke situated in the right middle cerebral artery. Luckily, because they caught it quickly, she can get thrombolytic therapy. But this treatment poses some hazards. Please start the treatment, Ashley pleaded, tears streaming down her face. James, who stood beside her, had a complex look on his face. I assumed he was probably already stressed about how much the therapy would cost. Linda silently got to work. She started getting everything ready, setting up the IV, putting in the monitors, and getting the paperwork ready. Essentially, my mom's life was now my responsibility. Once in the treatment room, Mom suddenly grasped my left hand in an awkward grip as her right hand wasn't working properly. That time, I'm sorry. Mom, please don't speak right now. We should concentrate on the treatment, I responded, gently but firmly pulling her hand away. By the time dawn arrived, my mom's health was stable. Her awareness was steady, and the paralysis showed signs of improvement, albeit small ones. Yet this was merely the opening chapter in what would be a long struggle. The rehab process would probably take at least 3 months. Ashley's face went white as Dr. Thompson continued. But my delivery, that's correct. Her sister's due date was coming up in August. It felt like the timing of Mom's care and the preparation for the baby were going to coincide. What are we going to do? Ashley's voice, barely a whisper, drifted through the hallway. This situation seemed like far too much for her sister, who had enjoyed a pampered life as a stay-at-home mom in a fancy house. Dr. Thompson called out, Head Nurse Carter. You know the most about this type of therapy and helping people recover. Since you're also kin, if you could, Ashley, excited, interrupted him. Linda, please lend us a hand. I'm really apologetic about what happened earlier. Shouldn't we forget what happened? Just put it behind us. Linda's phone vibrated and rang at that instant. Hello, Tommy. Yes, that's fine. Don't go to school today. Just relax and get some rest. Listening to what her son was saying, Linda smiled very faintly. I apologize. I'm a single parent. I cannot adjust my schedule for the night shift. The words were harsh, almost frigid, even though they were completely unambiguous. But, leaving Ashley upset, Linda went back to the nursing station. She turned on her computer and started to record again. May 15, 2024, concerning mother's emergency admission. Her fingers, as she typed, shook ever so slightly. Still, the trembling wasn't due to being scared. Definitely something had begun to change. The Arizona sun began to appear outside the window. The church bells started to ring, indicating the commencement of a new day. The sound was like an indication that fate had begun to play out. Mom was asleep in the hospital room. The dignity she once had was gone, and she just seemed like a frail old woman, breathing very softly. Her right hand would tremble sometimes, as though she was looking for help from somebody. Linda completed the last note and shut down the computer. The long night was nearing its end. When I got home, Tommy would most certainly be waiting with a worried expression. Head Nurse Carter. Right as I was getting ready to go, a young nurse practically ran up to me. Another young nurse. Would it be possible for you to swap with me and take Mrs. Miller? I'm not super experienced. I gently declined with a shake of my head. It's okay, I will handle it, but I hesitated for a moment. Just be absolutely sure to write down every little thing, okay? The young nurse appeared confused but agreed. The records, that's what really makes us nurses. That's like a nurse's assistant. A nurse's foundation, and often the most powerful tool we have. As I walked into the elevator, I let out a big sigh. This was merely the beginning of a long struggle that awaited me. Still, I felt a strange sense of calm in my heart. Even on a warm August night, the obstetrics unit at Mayo Clinic Scottsdale stayed softly lit. Ashley's agonizing cries were audible from the delivery room, and her husband, James, was anxiously walking back and forth in the hallway. Labor had already been going on for 36 hours, and still there was no advancement. Dr. Martinez explained the situation with a serious look on his face. Indications of a challenging delivery were starting to surface. Simultaneously, in the recovery room on another floor of that same hospital, Patricia's recovery wasn't going so well. Her strokes, after the first, were proving to be worse than we anticipated, with her right side showing very little improvement. She also still couldn't talk correctly, making communication very tough. Report on Mrs. Brooks's labor's progress, please. Another young nurse hurried to the nurse's station. I looked up and quietly examined the patient's chart. The chances of my sister experiencing postpartum bleeding were increasing. Carter, I apologize, but Mrs. Brooks is requesting your presence. Linda took a long, heavy breath. Ever since her mother had been admitted to the hospital 3 months before, her sister had constantly asked for assistance. Each time, Linda had politely, though definitively, declined. As I was heading towards the delivery room, my cell phone buzzed. It was a text from Tommy. Mom, don't stress about supper this evening. I'll handle it. Do your best taking care of Grandma. I couldn't help but give a small smile touched by the note. My son's culinary talents had definitely gotten better recently. In particular, his spaghetti with meat sauce, which was truly delicious. I pushed open the delivery room door and saw Ashley's distressed expression. Her face was puffy, the result of her high blood pressure related to her pregnancy. The beauty she once had was gone, replaced by a worn-out pregnant woman. Linda, please, I need your help. There isn't much I can do in this instance. However, certainly you can do something. Right then, the monitor began to beep, sounding an alarm. The baby's heart rate was decreasing quickly. Get ready for an emergency C-section, Dr. Martinez's voice echoed throughout the room. Several hours later, Ashley Brooks's baby girl, Emma Grace Brooks, arrived. Sadly, this was only the start of more challenging times. The signs of postpartum depression were very obvious. The diagnosis was delivered by psychiatrist Dr. Wilson. Ashley wouldn't even hold the baby and just remained in a state of detachment. Mom also needs care, James said, placing his hands on his forehead. His job as a partner at his law firm was incredibly demanding, taking up all his time, so he was unable to deal with any family problems. I've been looking for nursing homes, but they're all filled up. Getting into the top-tier care homes was tough. They all had waiting lists, yet Mom wouldn't even consider anything else. Her ego wouldn't let her go anywhere that wasn't first-rate. I'm asking for your help, Linda, too. One day, James went to the hospital. His normally steady voice shook a little bit. Both my wife and my mother-in-law need you to step in. Are there any stipulations? Linda slowly started to speak. Truly, are there any limitations? Yes, there is. Name your cost. This isn't about how much it costs. Linda rose and pulled a folder from her desk. It held the records from the previous few months, all perfectly organized. What I want is the absolute truth to finally come out. At church, Mom and my sister have to spill everything, that Tommy isn't a foster child but my actual son, and about all the prejudice we've suffered. James's complexion lost its color, but that would jeopardize Patricia's standing. Just then, the phone at the nurse's station rang. Urgent situation. Mrs. Miller has taken a tumble. Linda quickly went to her mother's room. Mom had tumbled out of the bed and she was desperately reaching for the bed rail with her left hand. Her paralysis on her right side made the movement clumsy. Mom, you're all right. Linda picked her mother up. The body that had once carried so much poise felt incredibly light now. I'm sorry. A raspy sound came out of Mom's mouth, which was twisted with pain. I'll do whatever you want. At those words, Linda was quiet. She gently closed her eyes. I understand. But I do have one thing I need you to agree to. That Sunday at the First United Methodist Church of Scottsdale, there was a larger crowd than usual. Word of what was going on had spread, and folks were arriving continuously. I quietly guided my mother's wheelchair towards the center of the church. Ashley was with us, her body still recovering from childbirth. James Brooks stood beside his wife, his expression unreadable. From the front near the pulpit, Mom started speaking, and her voice was shaky. It was 17 years ago that I did something awful. The entire congregation was listening intently as all the facts came out. She confessed to hiding her daughter, who had become an unmarried mother, saying my grandson had been adopted when he wasn't, and ripping the family apart. After she finished confessing, there was complete silence inside the church. All eyes gradually turned towards me, Linda. Without a word, I maneuvered my mother's wheelchair and departed. Later that evening, Tommy was very subdued at dinner. What did you think about Grandma's talk? I'm happy she was finally honest. A deep consideration was evident in my son's eyes. But whether to forgive is a different story altogether, isn't it? I hugged my son tightly. Yes, forgiving is something we get to decide. Outside, the sun in Arizona was going down. The church bells began to chime, signaling the end of a very long day. The sound they made wasn't threatening like before. Instead, they sounded soft, almost like the start of something fresh. That Christmas Eve, the wind was unseasonably cold in Scottsdale. I was sitting in the head nurse's office at Mayo Clinic Scottsdale, struggling to get my end-of-year paperwork done. Good job, Nurse Carter. One by one, the junior nurses were saying goodbye. Ever since those incidents a couple of years back, my performance reviews had consistently improved, and I'd become a key person in the nursing department. Mom, I'm here to take you home. Tommy popped his head in that evening. He was taller than me now, and his good looks were starting to mature. The president's emblem from the Scientific Research Club gleamed on his blazer. Can you hold on a few minutes? As I was wrapping up my entries on the computer, my phone started vibrating. It was a call from Desert Sunset Villa, the nursing home. This is Linda. Miss Carter, we regret to inform you, but Mrs. Miller is, once again, saying she wants to go home. I could hear my mother's upset voice coming through the phone. The aftereffects from her strokes hadn't completely gone away. Even after all this time, while the paralysis on her right side had gotten a little better, she still required someone to help her with everyday tasks. I understand. I'll go see her later. When I hung up, Tommy looked at me, concerned. Is Grandma having a rough time again? Yes, but everything's okay. The nursing home wasn't a fancy place, really. James Brooks's law firm had been shut down after it came out they had been involved in corporate accounting fraud. I could hardly manage the house payments, and a costly care home was out of the question. I remembered something from 2 years before as I was driving. Following the announcement at church, my mother and sister's reputations had quickly deteriorated. The women from church started to shun them, and old acquaintances kept away. When I got to the nursing home, Mom was seated by the window in a chair. Her previous sense of self-worth had vanished, and she appeared tiny and disheartened. "Linda, you're here," Mom's voice quivered a little. She'd been saying my grandson Tommy's name more frequently recently. Her prejudiced beliefs were completely gone. "Merry Christmas, Grandma." Mom gently took the homemade card Tommy gave her with her left hand. Her right hand remained useless just as she had wanted it. "Thank you, Tommy." Tears streamed down Mom's face. Suddenly, I heard hasty footsteps in the hallway. Turning around, I saw Ash standing there. Though still being treated for postpartum depression, she was slowly getting back into her everyday life. Even though she was in the middle of a divorce, somehow she was still taking care of her 2-year-old daughter, Emma. Mom and Ash just glanced at each other. There wasn't much to say. The animosity between them had disappeared, and they both looked exhausted. "Linda, this." Ash handed me an envelope. Inside was a letter written by hand. "To my dear sister." I tucked the letter that started like that into my purse. I really didn't feel like reading the note at that second. "Mom, shouldn't we go?" Tommy's words snapped me back to the present. It was a special Christmas Eve, and I was spending it with my boy. "Yes, let's," I replied. I gave my own mother a quick wave, and then Tommy and I headed out of the nursing home. "Hey, Mom," Tommy whispered while we were driving. "Do you think maybe it would be all right to forgive Grandma now?" My grip tightened on the steering wheel. "Yes, but I still could use some more time, okay?" Once we got back to the apartment, the small Christmas tree radiated a warm, inviting glow. The decorations Tommy had painstakingly put on the tree cast a soft light all around the room. On the table sat the roast chicken and salad he had made himself. Tommy's cooking abilities had gotten so much better. "Let's eat," I said. We both quietly picked up our forks and spoons before the wonderful meal. Outside, I could hear the sounds of church bells. The letter still in my bag was nagging at my thoughts. However, I decided it could wait until the next day. At that moment, I really wanted to appreciate the peace. "Mom, I'm planning on medical school next year." Determination was clear in Tommy's eyes. "I have no doubt you'll make an incredible doctor," I told him as I squeezed his hand gently. It was true that the past had been difficult, but the future felt so different. I could build a fresh life together with my son. In the night sky over Scottsdale, the stars were twinkling. They were shining softly, but definitely there, like the promise of a new beginning.